Okay, okay. Take your seats. Settle down, settle down. Welcome to the Road to Concord 101. This class is about all things connected to the path of history leading from Mount Sinai to Lexington Green and the individual liberty and freedom of man. If you're in the wrong place, feel free to get up and go see the registrar's office about dropping this class, preferably before you meet the professor. In the event you do not already know this, your professor is Joe Bakanovic, and he has a bit of a reputation on campus. He is most definitely an acquired taste, but if you can learn to tolerate him, he will make you better at defending your position, whatever it may be. I'm T.A. Charlie. I'm here to help the professor, but more importantly, you. We encourage you to take notes, and if you have questions, feel free to call. If you'd like the number, please email us. You can also post your questions in the comments, and we'll get the professor's attention. Part of my job is to let you know a little bit about your professor. As I said earlier, the professor has that bit of a reputation on campus. Not all of it is good. Let me help explain a little with a story about how I came to be the professor's TA. I was invited to attend one of his classes. My first impression of the professor was that he was an egotistical, narcissistic know-it-all. My intent after only a few minutes of class was never to attend another class with this professor. But after class, Professor Joe came up to me and thanked me for my class participation and told me that my perspective was valuable, and he asked me to keep coming to class. This actually took me back a little. To me, he seemed inconsistent. What was I to do? I decided to continue coming to his classes. As I did, I actually started doing what he does encourage students to do. Check behind him and see if what he is teaching is actually correct. I have done this over and over again, and generally speaking, I found what he teaches to be backed by sound, valid, and rational arguments from reputable sources. When I have challenged him and provided a sound, valid, and rational argument in opposition to his current position, he immediately changed his position and thanked me for correcting him. Why do I tell you all this? Professor Joe is a little rough around the edges, especially in the way he delivers his content. But if you stick with him and listen to what he teaches and then go and check his sources, you will likely find, as I did, he will help you better understand the world around you and help you to think better and hopefully to live better. At least that is our hope. One last note. This class builds on itself. Therefore, it is important to attend class regularly. We will not always have time to go over previously covered material. If you are new, we suggest you watch our older classes. We've created playlists to help you with those things we feel are of special importance. Now, let's get started.
Good morning. Welcome to the Road to Concord. It is December 4th, 2025, and I am your host, Joe Bakanovic. This is going to be a continuation of what we started Monday and followed into Tuesday. But this one's going to be a tough class because a lot of you are full of misinformation about the subject matter today. It's basically Islam. Islam is following, and I'm just going to get right into this. Islam's been following Wilson's playbook. You know, he's going to infiltrate the American government and take it over from within for communism or socialism, one of the secularisms. Well, Islam's been doing that to the United States, to the Western world. And the deep state, primarily, well, no, it's the deep state, is the Trojan horse for Islam into the United States. And they're going to take over from within. They largely already have. And they took advantage, Islam is taking advantage of the spiritual blindness of the deep state and its greed for Islam's oil money. The media is complicit in this. They push the idea of Islamophobia, but this is also MK Ultra and Mockingbird. Everything is racist, 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 racist. So I can shut you down if you're attacking any of that stuff by calling you a racist, or if I'm pushing the rainbow jihad, all I got to do is accuse you of being, a homophobe or whatever, and that shuts you down. It's a whatever phobe. This is the political correctness shield. And it's part and parcel of the same system. Like I said, the secular left just can't see this because of their arrogance, their hubris, and because they're religiously or spiritually blind. Islam doesn't suffer from that problem. Islam might be apostate to the point of being antichrist, but they're not spiritually blind. Now, this is nothing new. Since its inception, Marxism, socialism, secular humanism, in all its many different forms, has been politically aligned with Islam. Hitler was in league with Islam. He even had Muslim divisions in the SS, or division. The common thread between political, the secularism and Islam is a hatred for the Jews and a distaste or despise the Christians. So before we really, and I mean really dive into this, this is one of these times where, Joe, are you an expert on Islam? No, I would not call myself an expert on Islam. But this is one of these times where I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to try to establish some bona fides for myself. I'm about to show you some books I've read, every one of them. They go back at least 20 years, in some cases longer. One of the most important is by a guy named Paul Fregosi. It's just simply called Jihad. It's the history of jihad since Muhammad's life. That's a very good book if you want to understand what's going on. But I've also read The Western Views of Islam in Medieval and Early Modern Europe, Michael Frassetto and David R. Blanks. And there's some essays in here, some pro, a lot of them con for Islam, written by Christians in medieval Europe and early modern Europe. And then this book is by Andrea and Holt, 7 Myths of the Crusades. You've been taught that the Crusades were anti-Islam Christian aggression. No. No, the Crusades were a defensive battle. Now, they were fought for the wrong reasons, but they were defensive. They were in response to Islam. Now, I've read those 3 books. I want you to stick with me because I'm also telling a tale as I go through this. Now, Brian Keelmead put out a book. This is one of the simplest books I'm going to show you this morning. Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates. No. Barbary pirates. No. Muslim pirates. There we go. Now, why would this be important to me? Well, I was a Marine. From the halls of Montezuma, which is in Mexico, to the shores of Tripoli, which was the Barbary pirates. This is where we get the name Leatherneck, from fighting Muslims. So this country was actually born into conflict with Islam. In my heritage in the Marine Corps, I remember this stuff. A book by Tom Holland, In the Shadow of the Sword, The Birth of Islam and the Rise of the Global Arab Empire, known as a caliphate. It became known as the Ottoman Empire eventually, and then it was disbanded, destroyed by the Western Allies in 1924, only to be resurrected by the modern Western world. Here's a book, Holy Warriors, Islam and the Demise of Classic Civilization by John O'Neill. It's about jihad. Jihad does not mean an inner struggle or it's not like the Christian idea of dying to yourself. Jihad is literally, according to Muhammad, holy war, to kill all the infidels until there's nothing but Islam. Muhammad's words, not mine. Now, Muhammad and Charlemagne by Henry Pireni. I'll get that name right. This argues that what really finally put the nail in classic civilization was Islam and the jihad and the quest for slaves and gold. Before you dismiss that idea, read the book. Better yet, read Muhammad and Charlemagne Revisited, The History of a Controversy, Emmett Scott. because between these two books, they show you the archaeological and the other historic evidence supporting the claim that what really killed classic civilization, it was corruption and depravity that set it up for it. But what really finally put the stake in its coffin was Islam. And that I've read all these books, folks. I've read them all. The Decline of Eastern Christianity Under Islam, From Jihad to Timitude by Bat Yor. You're going to hear her name again in a minute. She was raised in this part of the world, in the Middle East. She's been trying to warn the West for a long time. Christianity and Islam, you cannot talk about one without the other. They are phononegatives of each other. So it mentions the dhimmi, right? The dhimmi, Jews and Christians under Islam, Bat Yor. Dhimmi basically means slave. If you're a Jew or a Christian, they will offer you dhimitude. You have to pay a tax every year. You have to dress a certain way, basically their version of putting the yellow star on your clothes. You can't own property or, a lot of things. You have no legal rights. You're a second-class citizen, but they'll allow you to live. This does not apply to anybody else in the world, only to, from what I've read, only to Jews and Christians, people of the book. Everybody else gets offered, you either become a Muslim or off with your head. They kill you. But now, and they're following this book, the dhimmi, they're following the commandments of Muhammad. Now, when they get down to where there's nothing left but the dhimmi and the Muslims, then they'll kill the Christians and Jews at that point too. Until then, they'll just use them. Much the way the anti-capitalists use the capitalists for the money they need to push their anti-capitalist agenda. It's a form of parasitical survival. And then finally, here's a book by Peter Hammond, Slavery, Terrorism, and Islam, The History and Roots of Contemporary Threat. This is also about jihad and slavery and about the dhimitude. Okay, so that's the history of Islam. It's been going on for a long time. Now, let's jump forward. I've read them all. We're not done. I want to establish my credibility here. This is by Joel Rosenberg, Epicenter, Why the Current Rumblings in the Middle East Will Change Your Future. This is late 90s book. And it's talking about how the politics is driven by the past. The politics of his time or our day, last 20, 30 years, driven by the past. He wrote another one, Inside the Revolution, how the followers of Jihad, Jefferson, and Jesus are battling to dominate the Middle East and transform the world. Read that. Muslims, Christians, and the Jews. Because it's essentially what he's saying. Jesus was a Jew. Now, I told you Bat Yor, we're going to hear her name again. Europe, Globalization, and the Coming Universal Caliphate. That's about the struggle between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Iran, about reestablishing the caliphate, a new Ottoman Empire. And she's got other books, and I'm not showing you all of them, but she has warned about how about how Islam was going to take over and infiltrate and destroy the Western world. Now, there's another book that I forgot to grab because it's on a different shelf since I've rearranged. It's David Horowitz, The Unholy Alliance. It's about the union of the political left in America and Islam. That book was published in 2004, but the information goes all the way back to the 70s. It's not the political left. It's the deep state. He wasn't aware of that, I don't think, when he wrote it. But he did write another book in that period of time called The Shadow Party, which is the deep state. He just didn't realize it at the time. Of course, hindsight is... Well, Andrew McCarthy has written a book, The Grand Jihad, How Islam and the Left Sabotage America. This was written after Horowitz. Same story. So I've read those two books about this. And there are a couple of others. This is The Control Factor, Our Struggle to See the True Threat, Bill Siegel. This is about Islam infiltrating the United States. And Infiltration, How Muslim Spies and Subversives Have Penetrated Washington by Paul Sperry. Okay. Now, I'm not done. I've read all of those. A lot of words there. I've read another book that you probably wouldn't believe I'd read. Alexander Dugin. I've mentioned that name. He's a bit of a Rasputin for Russia. You probably don't even know this, But Russia has been arguing that they're going to be the savior of the world, mostly because they're going to try and bring back Christian roots of ancient Russia, Tsarist Russia, and the moral fiber of the world based around the Judeo-Christian ethic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they think they're new jihad, and because they're responding to the moral vacuum that's been left as America has turned into apostasy. The European New Right, a Shia response, a radical critique of Alexander Dugin. It's written by a couple of Shia Muslims. And it sounds a lot like something that a conservative evangelical in America might say. It goes after the fact that nobody believes in God, the family is being destroyed, the family unit, et cetera, et cetera. Now, it's supporting Islam, but it sounds like it could have been written by Christians if you didn't know it was a Muslim book. Now for the next part I want to share with you. Islam, the cloak of the Antichrist. Now, I don't believe in an individual called the Antichrist. But if you want to look for somebody who fits that bill, you should be looking to Barack Obama. That book right there is by Jack Smith. Then you're going to have Joel Richardson. He's caught on to this. He's going to write The Scriptural Case for an Islamic Antichrist, the Mideast Beast. Now, hold on to this. This book was written 10, 15 years ago, something like that. But hold on to that for a moment. Middle East Beast. He also wrote The Islamic Antichrist. And what he's into here is the Mahdi, the 12th Imam, Islamic prophecy, is the supposed Antichrist of the Bible. Thing is, if you I don't want to get too much into prophecy today. That's not the point. We'll get into it later. But they're actually not opposite people. They're the same people. Richardson thinks that the Antichrist is Islamic and that the Islamics think Jesus is their Antichrist. But actually, it's a big mess. It's because nobody pays any attention to what the scriptures say. A little bit more clarity. Gentlemen, Joel Richardson helped him write this book, but Walid Shubat, God's War on Terror, Islam Prophecy in the Bible. This is why this book, Walid Shubat's a former Muslim terrorist. He converted to Christianity. And because he converted to Christianity, Joel Richardson got into this, and that's what caused him to write his 3 books. Remember, I've read all of these. And then the book that really got it for me, and this is going to be important to us here in a minute. This is by Ellis Schofield. It was published in 1990. The Mideast in Prophecy, Hidden Beast 2. I've mentioned this before. We did a while back. We did a summer-long series on that book. He's got an updated version of it called Sozo. But he also has Who is Behind the Middle East Terrorism, the False Prophet, Ellis Schofield. Again, it's about Muhammad. This book, The Hidden Beast, 1990s, that's exactly the same thing Joel Richardson's writing about in 2010s or whatever, somewhere in there. It's about the fact that the Bible calls kingdoms, governments, nations, political organizations are beasts, not people. The king is associated with it. And then Schofield also wrote the religious battle behind the headlines, Islam in the End Times. It's a synopsis. We can get all of those for free online if you want. So I've read all of that. I've also read this, the Quran. And there is a pile of sayings and customs of Muhammad, thousands of pages of that. I've read about 1,000 pages of it now. So when I told you I'm not an expert on Islam, I wasn't kidding. I don't consider myself an expert on Islam, but I'm not a novice. And well, Joe, those are all one-sided books. Did you catch the part where I said I read the Quran and I read the Hadith and I've read the book on Reliance of the Traveler where you get Sharia law from? That's Islam's Bible, Old and New Testament, and their didache or whatever you want to call it. The practices of their apostles. That's their work. That's right from the horse, according to what I've been told in history. So I had to go through that. Took you about 10 minutes, I think. Might have tuned out on me. The reason I did this is to show you that this is a history that goes all the way back in this. We've been at this for a long time through the establishment of the Western world into the United States. We've been at battle with Islam for a long time. So here's your homework today. It's Islam, America's Trojan horse. You know, the deep state is Islam's Trojan horse. I've got a few links in here I want to share with you today. We're going to start here. This is from the Gateway Hispanic. Ruling by the High Court of Justice of Balearic Islands imposes Islamic religion classes in Catholic schools and Mallorca and at the request of Muslim families, undermining Spain's Christian identity. What's that got to do with the United States, Joe? Just hold on. But what this is this is a Catholic nation, and their Catholic schools now have to teach Islam. Joe, that would never happen in the United States. In 9 Western state courts ruled constitutional for public schools to require a 3-week indoctrination to the Islamic faith in which all junior high students must pretend that they are Muslims and offer prayers to Allah. They are further encouraged to take Islamic names, call each other by those names, wear Islamic garb, participate in jihad games, and read the Quran during those 3 weeks. Yet the same court ruled it unconstitutional for those students to voluntarily mention under God in the Pledge of Allegiance. Eklund versus Byron, United States, 2005. Newdow versus U.S. Congress, 2002. Don't tell me it can't happen here. It already has. This is out west in the 9th District Court of Appeals. They're already forcing those children to keep Ramadan. Folks, some of those prayers they force those school children to recite, that's a prayer to allegiance to Allah. If they've been raised Christian and baptized and they say that prayer to Allah, that might be a sin against the Holy Spirit from which they cannot come back. That's been forced on them by our courts. Now, this site is in your homework. You can find the link. You can download the English PDF. I would suggest you put that on your computer somewhere if you can. If you are prone to the leftist idea of quote-unquote Islamophobia, you're not going to like this site. It's rather harsh, but it's truthful. It was one of the first sites I ever found when I started researching Islam, and I did what I always tell you to do. I went after it. I was going to prove it wrong. I started looking up everything it said and all its references and everything, and guess what I found? This site is, by and large, very accurate. It's an excellent reference. Then I want you and I to read through part of this. But are those children aware of what they're saying, Natasha? I don't know. They're junior high school students. I should hope they would be aware of it by that time, but who knows these days? Now, this is from Commentary. It's a neoconservative blog page. It's been publication journal. It's been around since the 70s. Notice the date, January 1976. We're going to read a few pages of this together. The Return of Islam by Bernard Lewis. And let me get a hold of this right here. This is a jumpy site. It's hard to get this right. In the great medieval French epic of the wars between Christians and Saracens, or Saracens, or however you want to pronounce this, Saracens, I think, in Spain. That's a name for Muslims. Now pay attention. I'm not reading this to you for nothing. This is going to set the table for what we're dealing with. In the great medieval French epic of the wars between Christians and Saracens in Spain, the Chansons versus Roland, the Christian poet endeavors to give his readers, or rather listeners, some idea of the Saracens' religion. According to this vision, the Saracens worship a trinity consisting of 3 persons: Muhammad, the founder of their religion, and 2 others, both of them devils, Apollon and Tirvergarat. Side note, Islam denies the Trinity, except unless, of course, you read the Quran. There's a Trinity in the Quran. Although Muhammad said that that's blasphemy. But it's in the Quran. Walid Shibat shows it to you in his book. And yes, it's there. It's in the Quran. All right. To us, this seems comic, and we are amused by medieval man unable to conceive of religion or indeed anything else except in his own image. Since Christendom worshipped its founder in association with two other entities, the Saracens also had to worship their founder, and he too had to be one of a trinity, with two demons co-opted to make up the number. In the same spirit, one finds special correspondence of the New York Times and of other lesser newspapers describing the current conflicts in Lebanon in terms of right-wing and left-wing factions. As medieval Christian man could only conceive of religion in terms of Trinity, so his modern descendant can only conceive of politics in terms of theology or, as we now say, ideology of left-wing and right-wing forces and factions. Now, if it matters to you, this is a predominantly Jewish think tank or Jewish minded. So back to the piece, and this is the part I really want you to start paying attention to. This reoccurring unwillingness to recognize the nature of Islam, or even the fact of Islam as an independent, different, and autonomous religious phenomenon, persists and recurs from medieval to modern times. Remember, this was written in 1976. We see it, for example, in the nomenclature adopted to designate the Muslims. It was a long time before Christendom was even willing to give them a name with a religious meaning. For many centuries, both Eastern and Western Christendom called the disciples of the prophet Saracens, they called them Saracens or Saracens, a word of uncertain etymology, but clearly of ethnic, not religious connotations, since the term is both pre-Islamic and pre-Christian. In the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, where the Muslims whom they met came from Morocco, they called them Moors, and people of Iberian culture or under Iberian influence continued to call Muslims Moors even if they met them in Ceylon or in the Philippines. So in other words, when their skin changed, they were still called Moors, color of their skin. What they're hitting on is the fact that nobody wants to label this what it is. Continues. In most of Europe, Muslims were called Turks after the main Muslim invaders, and a convert to Islam was said to have turned Turk, even if the conversion took place in Marrakesh or Delhi. Farther east, Muslims were Tartars, another ethnic name loosely applied to the Islamicized steppes, people who for a while dominated Russia. This is what we would call the stands today, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, etc., etc. Turks for the Ottoman Empire. Even when Europe began to recognize the fact that Islam was a religious and not an ethnic community, it expressed this realization in a sequence of false analogies, beginning with the name given to the religion and its followers, Muhammadism or Mohammedans, Mahamites, Mahatmites, or whatever. This is how our founding fathers referred to them, as the Mohammedans. The Muslims do not and never have called themselves Mohammedans, nor their religion Mohammedism, since Muhammad does not occupy the same place in Islam as Christ does in Christianity. This misinterpretation of Islam as a sort of mirror image of Christendom found expression in a number of different ways. For example, in the false equation between the Muslim Friday and the Christian Sunday, in the reference to the Quran as the Muslim Bible, in this misleading analogies between the mosque and the church and the ulam and the priests, and coming more directly to our present concern, in the imposition on Muslim history and institutions of purely Western notions of country and nation and of what goes on within them. In other words, we keep trying to conceptualize Islam in terms that we understand. Whether you're a Christian, you look at it as anti-Christianity. If you're just secular, you look at it as left-right wing thinking, etc., etc. It finishes the section I want to read here. It says, thus, for example, if Gibbon's fascinating account of the career of the Prophet Muhammad and his contemporaries were inspired by patriotism and love and liberty, two concepts which somehow seem inappropriate to the circumstances of the 7th century Arabia. For many centuries, Europe called the lands of the Ottoman Empire Turkey, a name which the inhabitants of those lands did not apply to their own country until the final triumph among them of European political ideas with proclamation of the Republic in 1923. Modern Western man, being unable for the most part to assign a dominant and central place to religion in his own affairs, found himself unable to conceive that any other people in any other place could have done so, and was therefore impelled to devise other explanations of what seemed to him only superficially religious phenomenon. We find, for example, Okay, I'm going to quit here. This is the part I wanted us to see. Why did I drag you through all of that today? It's very important for us to understand, first of all, that this was recognized decades ago in the 70s. And what they're trying to get America to see back then is you're not understanding Islam properly. You're not putting it into a perspective that Islam would understand and recognize. And why is that important? If you do not understand the threat, you'll never see it coming. And that's part of where we're at right now. We have a threat, and it's inside the gates, and we don't see it coming. And the fact that we didn't see it coming for so long, it's now too late to do anything about it. It now has we think the deep state has control of the country, and it does. But Islam has control of the deep state. Who was Hillary's right-hand woman for so long? That Iranian spy. How many of our leftist politicians have had Iranian connections, either lovers or spouses, or at least Muslim, not native-born American Muslims either? This is an infiltration. We have been infiltrated, and the deep state is now more under control of Islam than of secular humanist thinking. And thanks to Barack Obama, in large part, that's exactly what happened. So now when, Tuesday rather, when I told you part of the color revolution, when Obama says, hey, we're 5 days away from fundamentally, revamping the United States of America, fundamental transformation, everybody thinks, yay, secular socialism. And he's thinking, no, Islam. Well, Joe, everybody knows Obama's a Christian. Do we? We'll cover that next half hour. And we've been told by the media that Brenner, the CIA chief, he was never a Muslim. You want to be sure about that? I know that everything claims he didn't convert. Unless, of course, you look at what he's doing and who he protects and who he attacks, in which case it's harder to make that case. But the problem is we don't understand Islam. And I'm not going to try and get you to understand Islam today. For one thing, that article I just read, it's coming from a Jewish perspective. It's trying to defend, it doesn't want to overtly say that, but it is, if you understand what you're reading, I know this is an appeal to ignorance, it's a fallacy, but it would take a whole week of constant shows, 2-hour shows, for me to give you enough background to understand why there's Jewishness in that and why I know it. And it's because of the way they're defending the Bible. They're defending Orthodox Judaism in this. I'm sorry, but Islam is properly understood in relation to Christianity in a lot of ways, and not so much Christianity as the new covenant, which Christianity doesn't exactly follow the new covenant. It thinks it does, it doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. See, this is part of what I've been trying to get you to see all week on the road to Concord. There is clarity here, but oh my gosh, it's so hidden by lies and misinformation that you have to work your booty off for decades to get enough of the facts, enough of the pieces of the puzzle to see the picture clearly, or more clearly. And that's why this is all working. So we got a bottom of the hour break. We're going to take a 3-minute break. When we come back, I'm going to get a little more specific with this, and I'm going to show you what I'm seeing. But I had to set the table a little bit here, folks. I know it probably bored you, but I got to do this to get to where we're going in the next half hour. So we'll see you in 3 minutes. Natasha. All right. So Tuesday we went over how a color revolution works. What I'm telling you about Islam is a Trojan horse, and the deep state is its Trojan horse. If you're Islam, why would you bother to reinvent the wheel? And in this case, why would you bother to start from scratch trying to topple the United States? All you have to do is infiltrate the deep state, and then if you can control the deep state, you can take advantage of all the work it's already done. And that's what Shadow Party was all about. David Horowitz wrote a book on Shadow Party about how Obama and Soros just took over the Democratic Party. Well, the thing is, the Democratic Party was already communist. And Soros he's just a front man, remember, not a weak one. He's got power, but there are people behind him, I assure you. So these folks all thought, well, Barack Obama, he's one of us. He's a communist. So we're going to incorporate him. Well, just because you're a communist, that doesn't mean that you're actually after the same goals as any other communist. It's that's one of the things that part of what I'm trying to get you to see. If I have 100 communists in the room, I have 100 ideas of what communism is or isn't. That's why nobody ever understands communism. Just ask them. Oh, that's not real communism. You don't understand Marx. That's fine. Marx didn't understand Marx. So no wonder you don't understand him. The only people who understood Marx are anti-Marxists. So when I get them all in the room, it's like 100 libertarians. I got 100 little gods who are all thinking the same for themselves. It all seems different, but no, it's all God unto themselves. But they all have the same goal. Socialist, secular humanist goal is to, in the name of toppling capitalism, because that's exploiting you, their guy making you the victim, I seek power so I can fix this problem for you. Well, that's the pride, the lie, that's the promise, and it's a lie. And they're going to feed off the capitalists to fund their overthrow of the whole system so they can become the new dictator. That's what it's all about. Well, that's what Islam is too. That's what they're doing. So just as these people took over the Democratic Party and eventually the Republicans as well, the Muslims have taken over the Democratic Party, the deep state, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how do we know this? Well, if you go to your homework, there are a lot of different articles and links in there. One of them is this. I've told you about it before. It's Taqiyya, How Islamic Extremists Deceive the West. It's by Dr. Andrew Campbell. Taqiyya is basically jihad by moving in, using your laws to establish a stronghold, then outbreed the people around you, and then take over from within. It's top down. These Muslims, they're persecuted. You don't understand them. They're not here to overthrow you. Bottom up, the Muslims move into Dearborn and say, hey, we want our ways. They didn't come to assimilate. Inside out. So after they infiltrate and get elected into mayor and the police chief and everything, they just become Muslim. It's Van Jones. But Van Jones is talking about secular humanism. Socialism of some sort. And here you have Taqiyya. It's Van Jones's version used against them. Here's another book. This is Modern Day Trojan Horse, Al-Hijra, the Islamic Doctrine of Immigration, Accepting Freedom from Freedom or Imposing Islam. In other words, you become a Muslim. Well, the guy who wrote it's a former Muslim turned Christian. You might want to read that if you have time or of the mind to do so. So I put that in there for you. Then we have this. This is an excerpt from a document that was acquired here in the United States, but also, I don't know if you remember Bridget. I can't remember her second name, but she helped run Jihad Watch and everything. Bridget Gabriel or something like that. She's been screaming this from the mountaintop since they found this on the one of these jihadis' laptops in Afghanistan. But this is basically a plan to overthrow the United States of America from the Muslim Brotherhood and from within. Muslim Brotherhood, number one visitor to Barack Obama's White House. Number one by far. Well, page 4 is enablement of Islam in North America. Let me do this. Y'all can't read that. I know I can't, so we'll blow it up. Enablement of Islam in North America, meaning establishing an effective and stable Islamic movement led by Muslim Brotherhood, which adopts Muslims' causes domestically and globally, and which works to expand observant Muslim base, meaning religiously observant, aims at unifying and directing Muslim efforts, presents Islam as a civilization alternative, and supports the global Islamic State wherever it is. In other words, free Palestine and all this other stuff. That's the Ummah. That's the global Islamic State, what they call the Ummah or something like that. That is directly, literally, the global Islamic State is their kingdom, like the kingdom of Yahweh. And the Ummah is the body would be the Islamic body of Christ. So that article I told you, you can't use the Bible to understand Islam. No. Yes, you can. This is the way you better understand it too, because it is literally the religion of Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist. On page 5, it says the movement must plan and struggle to obtain the keys and the tools of this process in carrying out the grand mission as a civilization jihadist responsibility. See, it's jihad. It's just going to be war by flooding them with Islamic people. You're going to drown out the civilization you're taking over. Page 7, the process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan, Muslim Brotherhood, or Ummah, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of their believers. So they're going to do it from within and destroy the house. Does that not sound like Woodrow Wilson? We're going to infiltrate and remake the house from within with scaffolding and everything. It's the same language because it's the same spirit behind all of this. If you don't have spiritual eyes, you won't understand the thing I'm saying. He says, we must possess a mastery of the art of coalitions, community organizing, fascism, and the art of absorption, community organizing. It's a big tent. And the principles of cooperation. And on page 18, a list of our organizations and organizations of our friends. This is where the Muslim Brotherhood lists its front groups in the U.S. and notes the prominent organization like CARE, ISNA, and ICNA, and other names. Glenn Beck was big on this for a little while, mostly back when he was still on Fox News. And I firmly believe to this day that's one of the reasons he got left Fox News. It's because he was starting to really focus and hammer on Islam. And then when he started his own big grand thing that he was going to build this empire, he overextended himself. And about the same time that he almost went bankrupt and had to sell off the Blaze and stop with his plans for a TV and a movie theater and all this industry or whatever to compete with Hollywood, about the time all of that went bye-bye, he quit talking about Islam. I firmly believe what happened is he got caught up in financing problems because of Islam. They came after him and shut him up. It's one of the practices of Islam to shut up those voices that oppose them. From American Liberty, the Muslim Brotherhood's 1991 blueprint, a plan unfolding before our eyes. This is an article about how they plan on, related to the post I just showed you. It says, watch, this is from Not the Bee. So this is actual news. Watch this resurfaced clip of a British Muslim scholar who predicted the UK would be under Sharia law in just a few years. This is from 2024. And there's a video in here and the text and script. This is happening right now. And my computer decided to freeze there. And India Herald. So this is from India. And it's December 4th, 2025. In the nation of India. If I can find my mouse. I froze. All right. Natasha, am I still on the air?
Yes,
I hope
you're
so.
good on my end.
All right. Computer's freezing and glitching. We're going to fix that. I'm going to go to a different computer over the weekend. But this article is from India Herald, from the nation of India. Islamist imam explains plan to take over America. First Muslim mayor, then we nominate people to etc. In other words, what's happening now? You want mayors, then police chiefs, and then everything else. That's Ilyan Omar. This is going to be from 2025, November 2025. It's Fox News. Scathing report calls on U.S. to label Islamist groups infiltrating all aspects of American life as terrorist organization. Now, this guy right here, Zuhdi Jasher, he's always presented as the rational voice of Islam. Don't trust that man. Don't trust him. Walid Shubat once cornered him on live TV and asked him a question, and he refused to answer that question. I'm not going to get into it today. You have to understand Islam a lot better than we have time for today. You have to understand the history, the Battle of the Trench. But if you refuse to answer the question, or if you deny it, you're basically admitting that you're still faithful to Muhammad. So as soon as there's a caliphate, and a new caliph, like a Muslim pope, the head of the caliphate, as soon as that's appointed, that both Sunni and Shia recognize, this man right here is liable to become a wild-eyed, bloodthirsty jihadist. I would not trust him. And then from Rare Foundation, warning, 42 Muslim candidates have seized control of U.S. elections. CARE's political army has arrived. This is from November 2025, and it says, in the span of one election, CARE's decades-long blueprint for political domination has come to life. 42 Muslim candidates backed by Hamas-linked network, that's a terrorist-linked organization funding people in the United States government's state and federal level, have seized key offices across America, proving that the Muslim Brotherhood's plan to infiltrate from mosque to city hall is no longer a warning, but a reality. We're just not paying attention. And there's that book I told you about, Unholy Alliance. The left has the deep state, not the left. He says the left, it's actually the deep state, has been aligned with Islam for a long time. They were after the money. Now, this will explain a few things for you. Breaking. New video shows Saudi official plotting the 9/11 attack in Washington, D.C. prior to the massacre of 3,000 Americans. FBI has been holding the video for over 20 years. All right. We all know that 9/11 was an inside job. The government planned it. No, I disagree with that. The 9/11 was exactly what you saw on the TV. I know a lot of people are going to tell me I'm a liar. I could go over that. We've done a show debunking that, showing you I don't want to get into that. Why would the American government want you to think that it brought down the towers rather than the truth? Remember, there was nobody allowed to fly that day except the Saudis that the Bush administration allowed to leave D.C. There was at least one airplane full of Saudis that left D.C. and went back to Saudi Arabia that day. They were the only planes allowed to fly. The Bush family is very tight with the Saudi Arabian royal family. Don't forget, George Bush Sr., H.W., was the head of the CIA. You start tracking connections to the CIA, you'll start understanding a lot of this is deep state operation. This is all about oil. It's all about oil. So the Rockefellers and all of these other people, the folks who control the oil and the big banking and all that stuff, global finance, they're all caught up in this. Now, what would happen if you think it's the government? You're okay with that. I mean, you're going to all sorts of theories and everything, but what would happen if it came to be known that the government could have stopped this? They knew what they needed to stop it, but because the Saudis basically wanted 9/11 to happen, the federal government allowed that to happen and then protected the terrorists who attacked America. That would actually topple our government. But by telling everybody, oh, it was an inside job, the American government actually did it rather than allowing the Saudis to do it, all they got to do is laugh at you. Yeah, you're a conspiracy theorist. That's exactly what conspiracy theory was drawn up to do, to protect the government from domestic opposition. It started really bad with the Warren Commission, which was a lie about the Kennedy assassination. So this actually benefits them, for you to think they actually planned it and brought it down with a controlled demolition. Because if you knew that the Saudis brought down the World Trade Center and that the Bush family probably, at the very least, looked the other way and allowed them to do it, because there was warning, folks. If you've read the 9/11 Commission report, there was plenty of warning. We knew. The intelligence community knew what was going on. It's just, quote unquote, wasn't allowed to talk to each other. Got a little news flash for you. They do that behind the scenes. Everybody knew what was happening. Nobody acted to stop it. Instead, they acted to protect it, which tells us that, yes, the government did know what was going on, but we can't dare let the American people know that we allowed that attack to happen. And why would the federal government want that? Well, as a twofer. For whatever reason, the Saudis wanted it. It gave them what they needed to push the Patriot Act, a Republican victory, deep state victory, but supposedly, those Republicans did it. Yeah, there's a conspiracy going on here, folks, but you're looking at it the wrong way. And then remember in the Bible, when Babylon is destroyed in 1 hour, blah, 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 and the smoke goes up and all the merchants of the world sit afar off and cry about it. Everybody thinks that's New York, and it could be. It could be. But you got to remember, Babylon is spiritual apostasy, spiritual imprisonment. Well, New York City is economic, material, not spiritual. Well, Shia Islam wants to get rid of Mecca because they connect that with Sunni Islam. Well, if they ever nuke Mecca, that would be Mystery Babylon going up in 1 hour. And why would all the merchants cry over that? Well, naturally, we have more money with New York City. That's the financial capital of the world. Well, where's the capital that's thought of as controlling the oil of the world? Whether or not it actually does, it's thought of it. Saudi Arabia. If something happened to Saudi Arabia, trust me, oil prices would become unstable. Think of it in those terms, prophetic terms. And what I'm saying is not going to seem as crazy as it might now if you're thinking in strictly material terms. Here's another one. Leftists eat their own. Radical Hamas protesters send letter to progressive left. We are not loyal to our oppressors. I've told you before that the left thinks they can control these backwards goat herders. They're just a bunch of Muslims. It's going to be the other way around. This is from July 2nd, 2024. And that's exactly what this is. The left telling the Muslims, telling them it's going to be the other way around. Then I want to get a couple of these up. Let me show you what I got next for you. So we have this article here from Flame. This is a Middle Eastern Watch page. Highly recommended to read it because it's pro-Western, pro-Christian, Judeo-Christian. It says, lies the media tell to whitewash and protect Hamas terrorists, how they harm both Israel and the United States. So they lie to the American press, and the American press eats it up. It's not showing right here. There it is. This is an Iraqi journalist. The Western media is working for Hamas. And you can watch the video, and he argues that the Western media is doing Hamas's work. And they are, probably without ever knowing it. Then we have this. Remember Jeremiah Wright, quote, I made it comfortable for Obama to accept Christianity without having to renounce Islam. Islam can do that. That's part of taqiyya. They're also told that they can lie as long as it advances Islam. Well, there's that video clip where Obama said, my Muslim faith. No Christian's going to make that. It was just a gaffe. I'm sick and tired of people. Oh, well, it was just a misspeak, just a gaffe. And we give them carte blanche permission to just keep on going as though they didn't make an admission. Barack Obama is more than likely Shia Muslim. More than likely. But do we have proof? No, not the type I can bring into a courtroom. But I could argue it for a whole other different bunch of reasons, but you'd have to understand Islam very well to get to that. Then this is from the Daily Mail, from England. Barack Obama's choice for CIA chief converted to Islam, former FBI agent claims. Well, whistleblowers are good as long as they support the deep state, which means they're not really whistleblowers. But if they don't support the deep state, well, then they're just fake whistleblowers that we have to debunk. Okay. But this claims that Brennan was a convert to Islam while he was working in Saudi Arabia. And then this comes out. This is I don't remember where this comes from. It's all over the internet. I just grabbed it because it works. This is a video claiming former CIA director John Brennan speaking out about his Muslim faith in Arabic. Now, this article goes on to say, nope, that's not what he was doing, not what he was saying. It's meant to debunk this. I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. Unless, of course, I look at what Brenner was doing while he was in the CIA. And the fact that Obama put a whole bunch of Muslim Brotherhood and CARE people into the American intelligence community at high levels. management and middle management positions. Muslims into the intelligence community. Muslims who have sworn allegiance to Islam before anything else. How do they ever get vetted to get, oh, well, Joe, that's Islamophobia. See, that's the shield. You cannot, for the same reason that the founding fathers of this country would not allow a Catholic to be part of the government. Well, what, Joe? No, they didn't allow Catholics to be part of the government. Well, why? Because they had to swear allegiance to the Pope. Well, no, Joe, they swore allegiance to Christ. No, Catholics have to swear allegiance to the Pope because the Pope is Christ on earth. I was raised Catholic, folks. I know what I'm talking about here. And the founding fathers recognized that, so they wouldn't allow that. Well, it's the same thing with Islam. If you have to swear allegiance to Muhammad because Muhammad's the messenger. And if they ever get a caliph, oh boy, hang on, Jack. It's going to get ugly then. Caliphate and the caliph is basically their pope. So you shouldn't be able to get a security clearance if you're a Muslim to get into anything dealing with the United States security. All right, caliph, right? That's this from the American Thinker 2023. Iran and the cult of the Mahdi, the Twelvers. Glenn Beck tried to tell us about this too. That's not nothing. That's the Islamic version of the crazy guy standing on the street corner with the bullhorn telling you Jesus is coming back. That would be their way of looking at this. Only their Mahdi is, if you're going to go with the Tim LaHaye Left Behind version of eschatology, of prophecy, their Mahdi is the Antichrist. But the problem with that is that Tim LaHaye Left Behind version of eschatology with the single person being an Antichrist is probably, it's tied up with this because you won't find that figure in the Bible. He's not there. It's a spirit. Antichrist is a spirit. There are many of them. They've been in the world since the time John wrote those words. Hundreds, thousands of years now. But you can't get Christians to understand this, believe it, let alone understand what's going on with Islam. For those of you who may be interested, Jihad Watch, this is a blog page news site, focuses specifically on what's going on with Islam in the world. And then Flame, like I told you about, put both of those in there for you. So that's everything that's in your homework. It's all the show notes from today. Wrapping this all up and putting it on a platter for you. Everything I explained about color revolution on Tuesday applies to the Arab Spring. We just call it this, Arab Spring, this jihad and that, that takeover of this Arab country, and Libya topples and Egypt topples, and all of that's consolidation. They were taking over those countries. They were destroying any vestiges of a true representative democracy and making it ripe again for the takeover by ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or whatever, the new caliphate. They're trying to put an Islamic caliphate back together. This is done under the camouflage of not naming people. That article I read when we first started about how we can't name Islam. So instead of naming Islam, we say, well, all these Somalis up in Wisconsin, no, they're Muslims. Say, well, all these immigrants here from Afghanistan, no, they're Muslims. Well, all the immigrants that came in from Syria, Iraq, and all of Kurdistan and everything in there, they're Muslims. Well, no, they're Muslims. But you can't name them as Muslims. So you can't even recognize the threat. So I can't call them communists like McCarthy was doing. Because, that's a witch hunt, modern day witch hunts. Only McCarthy was right. History that's that book, Blacklisted by History. McCarthy has been vindicated. He did not accuse a single innocent person. But we can't name communists. So that gives cover for the communists to take over our country. And because the communists swallow their own Kool-Aid, they can't name Muslims. So the Muslims take over their movement within the United States. And instead of having a color revolution, you're now having an Arab Spring in this country, disguised as a color revolution. And when you look at it as the average citizen, it all looks like a bunch of chaos. There's no order. There are no patterns to it. But if you look at it like I asked you to do a couple days ago as an intelligence analyst, and you know how to sort the wheat from chaff, you see exactly what's going on here. It's an internal overthrow of the country using its own money to do it. It's suicide. And if you're looking at this with spiritual eyes, well, that ought to really alarm you. If you have loved ones who have not yet accepted the Messiah, Yeshua, that Messiah, have not accepted the God, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, not Allah, Yahweh, well, then that should concern you a great deal, because if you're looking at everything that's happening now through spiritual eyes, you know you are back in the days of Noah, then some, and that the pit is open. And all those 200 million helicopters that were let out, because you know that description sounds just like helicopters, only that description wasn't written to describe helicopters. It was written to describe spiritual language. And if you understand Islam, those 200 million locusts that come out sound an awful lot like jihadists. Well, Joe, there aren't 200 million. Oh, yes, there are. If you're looking at it spiritually, you live in a time where Satan is roaming the earth, fooling the nations again, the Gentiles. And the only people who seem to be seeing anything clearly anymore are those who are clinging to the Messiah, the small remnant. How's your spiritual warfare doing, brothers and sisters? You're fighting a huge battle right now. Some people think they're fighting the deep state. Some people think they're fighting the Democratic Party. Some people think they're fighting secular humanism. Some people realize you're actually fighting all of that plus Islam. Very few people realize you're fighting the beast, the dragon, government that has been empowered by the devil. It's exactly what John calls the dragon. But nobody ever lets the prophet define his imagery. No, we've got to be in charge of that. We want to be a prophet. You know what happens to a false prophet? You get killed. Oh yeah, Joe, but I'm still safe. No. If you're killed for being a false prophet, I don't think you're going to make it into the kingdom, because you were working against the kingdom, which means you weren't loyal to the king or his prince. Well, you be careful about trying to become a prophet, brothers and sisters. All right. I've wound down for today. Don't know if this made any sense to any of y'all. Makes perfect sense to me, but then I've been studying this for decades, in depth. That's why I went through all that crap with those books. I've read all of them, and then some. Those are just the deep ones. There's a whole bunch of surface books in here, too, I've read on this subject that I didn't bother sharing, like the Politically Incorrect Guides. If you want to start, that's a good place to start. Politically Incorrect Guide to Islam, to Jihad, to the Middle East. You'll learn a lot quickly for very little money. Then you can decide whether or not you want to dig deeper. Me, personally, if you're a believer, I'd tell you to just get a hold of Ellis Schofield's book, The Hidden Beast 2, or Sozo. You can find them online, free PDFs. His family has made them free. They're that important. The problem is, just like that 1976 28-page essay was saying, we just don't understand the nature of Islam. And that's why we don't see the threat. We thank each and every one of you for being here with us today. We hope that we're doing some good in the world here, educating you, teaching you something of value that you can apply in your life and use to, if nothing else, prepare, better understand the world, make sense of what the seeming chaos around you, see that there are patterns in it, help you fill in the blanks in your general knowledge so that you're not as unknowing about things, so that you can see that we're being lied to all the time on all sides. Nothing I told you today is a lie. Nothing. You might have a different interpretation of it, but I can show you where to find every bit of it. I'll give you the receipts. Just email me, Joe at the Road to Concord. Tomorrow, chapters 31 and 32, I believe, of the Unseen Realm. Then we'll go from there. So until we meet again, y'all stay safe. Take care of yourselves. We love you. Bye-bye.